Hello again, sweet darlings. We're trying something a little bit different outside in my garden because it's such a beautiful day. So if you can hear chickens in the background and planes and all those outdoor countryside noises, then I'm sorry about that. If you're new to my channel, then let me introduce myself. My name is Elizabeth. I'm a mom of two and a Catholic convert homemaking in the English countryside, and I release weekly videos here all about faith, femininity, and homemaking. So if those are the kind of videos that you like, it'll be lovely to have you subscribe. And if you're a returning subscriber, then welcome back. So nice to see you again. Today is a little bit of a different video, but something that has been kind of on my heart, and I feel that it's important to share with you all, to be honest. I share a lot of videos on this channel all about kind of my journey from being a feminist to trying to be more feminine, choosing to embrace traditional gender roles, and also, why submission is something that I'm choosing to practice in my journey as a wife. Now, I have released videos on this channel before about submission and kind of habits that I'm trying to form as part of that, but this video is more about why I've been struggling with submission and why you might be as well. I'm sure I'm not the only woman out there who hasn't been raised to see submission as a good thing, and also to have an understanding of why it's good, why it's biblical. All of this is very new to me, which plays a part in why I've been struggling with it. But I've just made some notes and I want to take you guys through kind of why I've been struggling, how that's manifested, and also some steps I'm going to take to try to improve that in my marriage. So, the first reason why I think I've been struggling with submission is because it's such a dirty word. There are some negative connotations associated with submission. And I think what this does, even when you get to the point that I have where I've lived the other side, I've lived a feminist lifestyle, kind of living the lifestyle where society tells you you're empowered because you're not committing, you're having casual sex, you're pursuing kind of material gain, and career, and university degrees, all of this kind of individualistic stuff. There's not much in that narrative about serving others, really loving others properly. And ultimately, I think in that lifestyle you don't actually love yourself properly. But I did grow up kind of with the view that gender roles and something like submission would be old fashioned, that it would be oppressive, and kind of not good for you and not good for your marriage. So I think kind of having those negative connotations around us all of the time means that when kind of the going gets tough, which obviously inevitably it does, and it does for me as well, that then you kind of slip back into those mental habits, kind of those lazy habits, or I suppose kind of the darker side of you, the side that isn't doesn't want to follow God and doesn't want to be loving or life-giving and selfless, and invest in your marriage. But the bit that is individualistic, your ego talks to you and says, well, of course, this is hard because you're not supposed to be doing submission, this is wrong, and everybody tells you that, and look at all of these other examples of people who say that they've tried it and it didn't work out for them, and it ended in abuse and yada yada yada. So all of those kind of things go through your mind, and also means that when there's those negative connotations of submission, you're very quick to, and I've been very guilty of this, you're very quick to either blame submission as the issue rather than yourself and your own habits, or you blame the other person, you blame your husband. And I've definitely been guilty of that, of kind of blaming my husband in situations where we haven't seen eye to eye and there's been tension between us. I have felt very much like that tension couldn't possibly be my fault. So it's actually been really useful recently, because what we do, because we've been on such a journey from having no faith, and also me being kind of like a hardcore feminist when we met, we do have these kind of periodic check-ins spontaneously where we kind of assess these like big picture ideas, like, okay, well, what does it mean for me to be a good wife? What does it mean for him to be a good husband? How's it going with the whole like being the leader and protector of the family thing? How's it going being a submissive wife? And we had one of these chats recently because we've been having quite a few arguments and tension, really like over silly little things, as it always is. But it was like day after day of like this tension where, um, you know, in retrospect, I was really like challenging his authority and I wasn't being very nice or respectful. And so we had this chat, kind of a little bit of advice. I have never found that it works well to deal with stuff that's happened in an argument immediately after the argument. You need to kind of like wait a day maybe and let it cool off. And then when you're both calm, without emotion, like without hurt, all bundled up in it, say, hey, like, do you want to talk about what has happened the other day? And that's exactly what my husband did. He said, hey, like, do you think we should talk about why we've been having these arguments recently? And I was like, yeah, we should, because it's like bugging me too. And I don't, I think it's this, but like maybe it's something else. So we had a bit of a chat, and a couple of interesting things came out of it. I think the first thing, which isn't on my list, but I'll mention it, is that I was making a mistake of, in my own kind of spare time, consuming a lot of content that was from kind of male Christian influencers. And what they were talking about was really about how men can be good leaders, providers, all of that stuff. And obviously, they do mention in passing like what women can do, but it wasn't really hearing from women enough about how to become a submissive wife. And I think that there's actually kind of a bit of a void on the internet for that kind of content. There's a lot of content where people reinforce, okay, well, this is why you should be a submissive wife because it's in the Bible, and maybe like this is the good stuff that's going to happen when you become a submissive wife. Like, look at my marriage, I've been married 35 years. But there's less content, there's hardly any that I've come across, and if you have found any, or like good books and resources, drop them into the comments below, where people are actually saying these are the practical steps to get yourself to like learn to be a submissive, like day-to-day basis. Here's like a challenging situation, well, this is how you would have handled it before. Now that you're trying to practice submission, this is how you should try to handle it, because it's like baby steps. It's all of these little everyday things, like, well, how do you act like a submissive wife when you disagree with your husband about the kids? How do you act like a submissive wife when you need to ask your husband for something, but he also, really needs you? Like, how do you prioritize? So, there's stuff like that that I've been struggling with. And I'd been making the mistake of consuming a lot of content that focused on what men can do. So when I came into this conversation, and even before that, like when we've been having these arguments, in the back of my mind, I had this kind of little victimhood thing going on where it was like, okay, well, maybe I've made a mistake, but I know that, he's not doing all of these things that XYZ influencer or XYZ, priest or XYZ, married Catholic guy with 7 kids does, and that seems to be working well for them. So really, I wasn't kind of looking at the context and really like looking at my husband and like what he was already doing. I was just still being a feminist, basically. And that's ironic because obviously a lot of this kind of traditional Christian and Catholic content is so anti-feminist, and yet by consuming it kind of like from the male perspective, it was reinforcing like the feminist past in me, my feminist core, that wanted it to like be somebody else, or wanted to like be able to focus on what someone else could do rather than focusing on myself, because that's always really hard. It's really hard to focus on yourself and what you can do and like look in the mirror. That is tricky. So that was part of it as well. Another thing that we figured out during this conversation is that kind of my association of submission was a little bit twisted, and I didn't really understand, and I still, I need to work on this, how to be kind of submissive during a disagreement or during like everyday situations, so that it doesn't get to the point of an argument. So what I'd been doing, what I've written down here, is that I was taking it to the bitter end, and then I was associating submission with my husband putting his foot down and making the final decision. So I understood submission enough to understand that when my husband says, this is what we're doing, I don't challenge him. Or when he says, you need to stop talking to me like that, or please don't do that with the kids, I respect his decision there. But what I'd been doing is I'd kind of been pushing him to having to make that point too often, where he had to put his foot down because I was being like disrespectful and rude, or just kind of like naggy and challenging him. And I suppose like in the moment I didn't really see it. I just wanted to be right, and I wanted to what's the word, yeah, I think you just, the feminist in me wanted to have the final say, even though I know that I don't really get to have the final say. So that was also a problem, because then I was associating with submission with kind of, this negative experience of almost an argument, or kind of feeling like I wanted to have an argument, but knowing that I shouldn't say something else, and like kind of, be rude. But, when you've already allowed yourself to get so tense, and be kind of disrespectful and rude to the other person, and obviously they respond, then you kind of feel like a good old argument, but you know that you shouldn't really have one. So that wasn't helpful either. I think also what plays into the fact that I've been struggling with submission is that as a child and a young adult, I didn't learn how to ask nicely or give feedback nicely. Now, that's not to say that I didn't have manners as a child or that I don't understand how to softly tell someone when they've made a mistake. But I think it changes when you're married, and you do need to kind of learn how to ask nicely and give feedback nicely, specifically in the context with men. And like once you're a submissive wife or trying to be a submissive wife, like, when you're deferring to their authority, like how do you know, ask for something that you need nicely, but so that they know it's a priority. I mean, this is kind of like an art form, which, I think largely women aren't being taught. And certainly, I'm figuring out on the job. And often I have to say to my husband, or he says to me, like, well, if you said it like this, it'd be totally different. And it just would never occur to me to say it that way. So that's something that I'm still learning. And that can definitely kind of like hinder progress, because it is about the way that you say things. And I say that to my husband all the time. I'm like, well, you were right, but it was the way that you said it that hurt my feelings. And that's obviously like, my emotional side. But I think that's often the case for women, is that, it's, you can kind of see the truth eventually. And often if I go away and reflect, I'm like, yeah, okay, he was right. But in the moment, what you're listening to is like the way that they're saying it. And obviously nobody's a saint, so they can't always say it in the way that you want them to. And maybe even if they did say it in the way that you think you want them to, it wouldn't actually help. Who knows? It's just one of those things that the way you say it, does make a difference. The next thing on my list is kind of wanting to be right. That's just kind of part of our fallen nature, I think, as people. But it's difficult to let go of once you're married, and you do kind of have to let go of it to an extent, as much as you can. I think especially if you're going to be, a submissive wife and living traditional gender roles, kind of wanting to be right. That that can really kind of overshadow your good judgment and like your respect for your husband. It kind of plays into the previous point as well, because like giving feedback nicely, I think there's a way of giving feedback that comes from a place where you really are loving that person, and you're really caring about them, and you're really seeing, okay, well, this is a problem that's like maybe hurting other people, or it's hurting you, or it's kind of like holding you back, and you want them to grow. And so you kind of find a way to share that feedback with them from that place. And then there's a place of wanting to share feedback because somebody made a mistake, or you're feeling like you want to kind of bring them down or be right, so you share feedback with them because you want to show them that like you figured something out, or they were wrong and you were right and they should have listened to you. And sometimes that is where like the feedback comes from. From me, like if I'm being honest, when I think about the motivation, it's not because it's like really the end of the world, or I really think that that habit is like holding my husband back or holding our marriage back or anything like that. It's more just, well, I had an idea of how we could do that situation differently. You didn't listen. And like now, if only we'd done it my way, kind of thing. You want to be able to say that to someone, which is obviously like a massive ego issue. And we talked a little bit about that when we were having this conversation, and my husband made the point that, kind of what I was missing, and I think probably what a lot of women miss as well, is when you start living in a dynamic where the man is the leader and he makes some final decisions, he makes a lot more final decisions maybe than he did before, that level of responsibility is huge. And ultimately, when you're making more decisions, you're going to make more mistakes. That's kind of part of leadership. Like it's the same as if you're a CEO and you make lots of final decisions, like lots of them will be mistakes, but that's kind of part of leadership. And the people beneath you don't get to say, well, because you made a mistake, therefore, you're not fit to be the leader, because you make loads of choices that obviously like lead to good things. But that was something that I hadn't really considered, that obviously that's a risk that he takes by taking on that responsibility and that decision making power, that he will make more mistakes inevitably. And it's not my job to say, well, look, you made a mistake, like, maybe I should make decisions about that. He still gets to make the decisions, but obviously over time we all learn from our mistakes. So hopefully, we even things out in time, and we learn and don't keep making the same mistakes. But you have to make them, we all do, we have to make the mistake initially. So yeah, those are the notes that I made about why I've been struggling with submission. And I wanted to share it with you because it's a pretty incredible journey to come from like where I was as someone who was a feminist and kind of like believed that like, men and women were the same or could be the same. And like, wouldn't it be great to have a guy at home with the kids and I'll go off and, make money. And I've just found so much peace, even though it's challenging to kind of change my heart and also to follow. Whew, So windy. So nice though. So peaceful. Yeah, so it's been challenging to kind of change my heart, but I know that, every time I make a little bit of progress, there's just so much peace that comes with it in your life. And you see it in our dynamic, like the things that we argue about now. It's just on the day to day basis, there's hardly any tension. And really, it's kind of like when I let the ball drop and I'm not doing the things that we've kind of agreed that I'm going to do, that I start to see the tension build up. My husband is very patient, so he's very slow to kind of say that something's bothering him. But often when he does get to the point of mentioning it, I kind of know that I haven't been doing it for a while, but I've just been, lazy, and I haven't been inclined to kind of do anything about it just yet, which is something that I need to work on. But in terms of kind of working on, submission after identifying these challenges, I think the first thing that I'm going to do actually is take up journaling again, because I was saying to my husband, the great thing about journaling, and I used to do it so much before we, moved in together, basically before we got married, is like it really helps to process your emotions. So when you come to a conversation, you've already processed stuff. And for me personally, and I'm sure for other women as well, often when you're talking through things through the first time, you don't really have it sorted out in your head, but you do need to talk it through. And I found that journaling is a great way to kind of get that straight in your head. You can't really lie in a journal. I don't really see the point anyway, at least for me, about how you actually feel about something. And sometimes you think that you feel a certain way, and then you're trying to put it down on paper and you're like, actually, no, it's more like this. Okay, if I'm going to write it down, let's be honest. So I do want to take that back up to kind of help me process some stuff, and also keep track of like things that are going well, maybe kind of like keep tabs on things that I'm grateful for as well, um, which I think would be helpful, and also make more of an effort to kind of check in with my husband about, how have things been going, and also encourage him, like when he kind of feels that I'm being, a bit disrespectful or challenging him, to kind of tackle it then, maybe before it gets to the stage of having to put his foot down, where I kind of feel a little bit like butthurt. That's what we say in our house, is like when you know that you've done something wrong, but you kind of like are annoyed that somebody told you off. We call it like being butthurt, which is not a very ladylike term, but that's just what we use in my house. um so yeah, encouraging him as well to kind of be more open about when I'm being annoying in that way and stuff, and also like try to find some more resources for this topic, to help me kind of practically on a day-to-day basis, because I found some like great stuff previously about, kind of ways to serve your husband. That seems to be much easier to find content on, about like kind of how to, practical ways to, show him that you care. And obviously I've released content about that in the past, because I've really found that some of those things have helped, and have given like me purpose and kind of things to do to like show him that I care, every day on a day-to-day basis. And then those things become habits, and you don't even think about it as a special thing anymore. You just do it. You just bring him his pajamas, or you just, make him a nice coffee, or you just, have his favorite snacks ready, whatever. It doesn't become hard work. It just becomes part of your daily rhythm. So I'm sure that I can get to a point where, submission and kind of that, dynamic between us from a leadership point of view becomes easier. It's just not there yet. So that's why I wanted to come on and just be honest with you all, and kind of give you a bit of encouragement that if you're in the same boat, like farther along in your journey or earlier on in your journey, that, it is a journey. And as long as you keep talking to your husband about it and praying about it and trying your best, when you fail, then kind of picking yourself back up again and being like, no, this is still a good idea. I just haven't mastered it yet, but I can improve. I can pick something to improve on, like right here and now. So, yeah, I hope that encourages you a little bit. Hope to see you all here again soon for another video. But in the meantime, take good care, everybody, and God bless.